Where the heck are you? The funeral has already started. What are you doing? Hurry back.
From the phone, the piercing voice of my husband's daughter, Nancy, made me wince. Can you stop yelling? I'm not planning on attending the funeral. Then Nancy screamed through her tears.
Pissed off. Where on earth is there a wife who wouldn't attend her husband's funeral? Everything's a mess here. Just do what you need to do.
For the past 8 years, I have been despised by my husband, stepdaughter, and grandchild. On the day my husband died, I found out about something, so I moved silently on the day of his funeral and disappeared. Calls came from my stepdaughter in tears, but I had no intention of attending the funeral. After all, for these 8 years, I have been continually taken from by them. Now it's my turn. Following this, my counteractions will lead my stepdaughter and grandchild to lose everything. My name is Mia Cantrell. At 60 years old, I worked for a foreign insurance company. I decided to join this company, newly established in the U.S., because I had studied Spanish in college. People around me would say things like, "That's quite adventurous." Since joining, my days were filled with work, from early morning till late at night. Literally no days off. That's how I spent my 20s, without making any lovers, and dedicating myself to work. As I passed 30, I get promoted, became more efficient at my job, and began to have more free time. I thought it might be time to start looking for my own happiness and registered at a popular dating service at that time. At the dating service, I couldn't find the one right away. As I began to understand the difficulty of finding a lifelong partner, I met someone.
Nice to meet you. I'm Mike Thompson.
The greeting came from a well-built man. His gentle smile gave a friendly impression. This was my future husband, Mike. Mike was 4 years older than me, a salesperson at a small company. He has been married before, but separated from his ex-wife 2 years ago due to incompatibility of their personalities. Though we were in different fields, both being in sales made our conversations lively. We both enjoyed traveling, which led us to start dating with marriage in mind. Mike was always a gentleman on dates, and I was thrilled with my newfound love. After dating Mike for about a year without any issues, and we planned to go on a trip to a resort hotel together on our first relationship anniversary. I was hoping maybe he would propose to me during the trip. Excited, I waited at our meeting place. Finally, Mike's car pulled up. As I was about to greet him with a smile, I froze. From the back seat of the car, 2 unfamiliar people emerged. One was a flashy dressed woman around 60 years old. The other was a girl about 10, holding a comic book. Well, Mike, who are these people? Mike turned back to the 2.
This my family. My mom and my daughter. Come on, say hello.
Then his mother looked me up and down and said,
I'm Joyce, Mike's mom. You're Mike's girlfriend. You have a plain face. You have small eyes, don't you? All our family have big eyes and well-defined face.
Bluntly put by Joyce, I was more disturbed by the presence of the girl. Daughter. Did he say daughter? I hadn't heard a word about a child. Prompted by Mike, the girl looked up from her comic book to greet.
I'm Nancy.
And with that, she dove back into the book. Mike, well, what's going on? I don't understand any of this. Confused, I spoke to Mike, who nonchalantly explained.
When I said I was going on a trip, they both wanted to come along too. It's fine, right? Let's all enjoy it.
That wasn't the answer I was looking for. Eventually, still bewildered, I got into the car, as Mike urged. Mike, you have a daughter. In the car, trying to be as polite as possible, I asked that, and Mike replied,
Didn't I mention it? I took in my daughter from my previous marriage.
Then Joyce chimed in.
But I'm mostly the one raising her. I'm happy to think I'm finally being freed from this role.
I looked up and said, huh, but Mike told me.
Get along with Nancy and my mom. Come on, try talking to them.
Tentatively, I turned to the back seat and spoke to them. I'm Mia Cantrell, dating Mike. Nice to meet you. Then Joyce said,
Well, I've heard most of it, so no need for introductions.
I said to Nancy, Nancy, nice to meet you. Nancy just responded with a yeah and went back to her book. Amidst the awkward atmosphere, Mike and his mother started talking about some neighbors I didn't know. I was still completely confused. Mike had a child, and he had taken her in without telling me, but who brings their family on a romantic trip without saying anything? What is going to happen on this trip? When we arrived at the hotel, the rooms were divided between Mike and me, and his mother and Nancy. The moment we were alone, I blurted out to Mike, Mike, what is this? You have a daughter, and you never mentioned it, not once in a year of dating. Mike looked bewildered.
Did I forget to mention it? Well, it's no big deal.
I swallowed my words and said, And what about bringing your family on our trip without asking me? Mike still looked puzzled.
What's wrong with that? We're going to be family. So it's fine, right?
No, this conversation isn't going anywhere. I felt dizzy. Mike quickly left to go to the pool, leaving me flustered. Eventually, when it was time for dinner, naturally, Joyce and Nancy were there. The meal was luxurious, but I could hardly swallow. Suddenly, the lights in the dining room dimmed, and sparkly music started to play. Wondering what was happening, staff approached with a cake and a bouquet of bright red roses, handing the bouquet to Mike. Could it be?
Mia, I love you. Let's get married.
Mike said this with a self-satisfied expression on his face. All eyes around us were fixed on our table, waiting for me to say yes. How many people in the world could respond with no? Give me a moment to think. When faced with such an extravagant proposal, I replied with a trembling voice, Yes, I'd love to. Then the surrounding guests burst into applause and excitement. Congratulations! Shouts and whistles came flying in. The lights returned to normal, and the guests went back to their meals. I was holding the bouquet, dumbfounded, watching Nancy greedily eating the cake.
Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about what's next.
Joyce pulled me back to reality.
I'll accept your marriage to Mike, so be grateful. Once the house is built, I'll be moving in with you.
What? I inadvertently exclaimed. Moving in, once the house is built.
Yeah, Mom and I decided to build a larger house. Even though we're family, it's better to have some privacy, right? This is for Mia's benefit too.
Mike said casually.
Dad, I'll have my own room, right?
Of course.
Mike replied. As the three of them got excited, I continued to be stunned. Afterward, I ended up signing the marriage certificate, just going with the flow. I decided to think positively as best as I could. Getting married to the person you love. Mike meant no harm. Looking forward to our own home is exciting, and it's good to have a larger family. Thus, Mike and I registered our marriage. Suddenly, I became the mother of a 10-year-old daughter. Before moving in together, I read books and tried my best to be a good mother to Nancy. On the day we finally started living together, I approached Nancy. Nancy, let's get along. I'd be happy if you could think of me as your mom. Then Nancy looked up at me and said,
That's annoying. Don't bother me too much, old hag.
I was taken aback, but Nancy quickly went to her room. Though I felt uncertain about the future, I convinced myself that Nancy was a teenager and complex feelings are expected with a parent's remarriage. However, life from then on was hellish. Out of nowhere, Joyce said,
From now on, you'll take care of all the household chores.
I explained that my job was very demanding, but Joyce glared at me.
That's no excuse. You came here as Mike's wife, so you'd better work hard at home too.
And truly, Joyce completely abandoned all household duties. If only Mike or Nancy would help. However, they simply did whatever they pleased, never offering to help. Instead, they started complaining the cleaning isn't done right, or the food is too bland. I endured, continuing to do the household chores, but instead of appreciation, they began to treat me coldly. Soon after we got married, Mike said his work got busier, and he started to be away from home more. Business trips increased, and he would go out even on weekends, claiming it was work. Those times, I had to spend with Joyce and Nancy, but I was having a hard time with Nancy.
What? Fish again? I want something like a burger.
Nancy looked displeased at the grilled fish I had prepared for dinner. Nancy, you're a bit picky, so you need to learn to eat everything. Let's properly eat the fish. I said so, but Nancy ignored me. Joyce spoils Nancy like that, giving her treats. When going back to her room, Nancy snapped at me.
You're so annoying, old hag. Don't lecture me.
I had been struggling with how to interact with Nancy. Around that time, I was handed several letters by Mike.
Fill these out.
I looked, and they were documents about renaming a mortgage. What do you mean, fill this out? As I was confused, Mike explained.
I took it out in my name initially. But the repayments are tough. Mia, you are making more at a major company, so you pay it. I'll cover all the living expenses.
I said no multiple times, but Mike wouldn't budge.
So what are we gonna do? sell the house. Then, it's 4 of us in a cramped apartment. I'm fine with that, you know.
After being told this over and over, I finally agreed to change the house into my name and make the repayments on the condition that Mike pays all the living expenses. However, Joyce and Nancy, who knew nothing of this, continued to torment me, especially as Nancy, now deep into her teens, became incredibly confrontational. But I became her mother. After all, I kept enduring. After 8 years of this life, Nancy graduated high school, got a job, and moved out. I was briefly relieved. But then Joyce was found to have a malignant tumor and was hospitalized. Things progressed quickly after that. Joyce weakened rapidly and passed away within a year. Mike, at least, seemed affected by his mother's death, crying his eyes out. When I thought of what my mother-in-law had done to me, I did not truly grieve, but I carried out her funeral solemnly. I hadn't seen Nancy in a long time at Joyce's funeral, and she seemed somewhat plumper overall. She lived alone, and I wondered if she had a poor diet. But on the night of the funeral, she told us something shocking.
I'm pregnant, you know. Not sure who the father is. So, I'm moving back home to raise the child.
What? My eyes widened. Looking at Mike, he seemed just as shocked. No wonder. Nancy was not even 20 yet. Yet, she seems to intend to give birth to a baby whose father is unknown. I expected Mike to scold her, but my expectations were betrayed.
If that's the case, you should come back home. I'd be happy to live with you and my grandchild.
Thanks, Dad.
Nancy seemed pleased. I felt dizzy. Just when I thought life with Joyce was over, Nancy was coming back.
Please look after me again, old hag.
Nancy patted her stomach and smirked. After that, Nancy really did come back home, and as expected, started bossing me around again. Then, a few months later, she gave birth. The baby was a boy, whom Nancy named Sky. Babies are indeed adorable. I hadn't had one myself, but felt the urge to hold him. Nancy, won't you let me hold Sky?
No, I don't want an unrelated stranger to hold my baby.
Next to me, standing there, only Mike happily held Sky. After Nancy came home from the hospital, the care of Sky was mostly left to me. Changing diapers, making formula, and dealing with his nighttime crying all fell to me. Nancy would pick up Sky and spoil him, but when it came to actual care, she did nothing. Yet, I did everything I could for Sky's growth. I bought books on baby food and fed him persistently, and I paid for all the diapers. Just when Sky was starting to say Mommy, Sky reached out to me, trying to call out, "Hi, Sky, I'm your grandma." When I tried to teach him that, Nancy snatched him away and corrected him.
No, Sky. She's the old hag.
Nancy, who neither worked nor properly took care of her child, just stayed at home. Yet, I couldn't be strict with Nancy, who still had a small child. Before I knew it, 8 years had passed since Nancy returned. As usual, Mike was often away from home and indifferent to me. When he did come home, he would complain about the taste of the food or how the ironing was done. Somehow, Mike had also stopped contributing the promised living expenses, claiming, "I need it for something." Nancy was now 27, but incredibly, she still wasn't working. While relying on us for everything, she called me old hag and bossed me around. Since Sky started elementary school, she seemed to go out often during the daytime. As for Sky, having seen me treated like a slave by Nancy from a young age, he regarded me as the lowest in the family.
"Hey, old hag, hand over some pocket money, now."
Such was his way of speaking, even in second grade. He seemed to be causing problems at school, but Nancy did nothing about it. "Sky, I just gave you some the other day. You have to use money wisely." When I said that, Sky glared at me and spewed more abuse. Sometimes, he would even raise his hand to me, and I was exasperated. By this time, I had started recording the awful things Nancy and Sky said to me, saving them as audio files under the name Verbal Abuse Collection. There was no particular reason why I did this, but somehow, doing this work seemed to relieve my stress a bit. I suddenly thought, why am I putting up with this life? It was just because I had agreed to marry Mike. That was all, and it was me who had agreed to marry him. With this resignation and sense of duty, I continued this life. Hated and blamed by the entire family for 8 years, my self-esteem was completely low. At some point, I even started to think I deserved this treatment. Then one day, something happened. I received a call from the police station on my cell phone.
"Is this Mia Cantrell's phone? It's about your husband, Mike."
It was the news that Mike had died in a traffic accident. Apparently, he had mismanaged the steering and fell off a cliff while heading to a resort town not far away. When I arrived at the hospital and confirmed the identity, it was indeed Mike. While I watched Nancy cry her eyes out, I still couldn't feel the reality. My husband had died. Really? Half dazed, I received Mike's belongings from the police. Among them was an unbroken smartphone. Something bothered me. Why had Mike, who said he was going to the Northeast on a business trip, been near the resort town? Alone, I opened Mike's phone and was about to uncover a shocking truth. Well, so that's what it was. Unforgivable. At that moment, I made a decision. The next day, Mike's funeral was to be held. I was responsible for arranging his funeral service. "I have things to do, so go ahead to the funeral venue first." I said that to Nancy and Sky as I sent them to the venue, but Nancy was just crying, and it seemed like she wasn't listening to a word I said. At that time, I had left Mike's tablet at the funeral venue. After dropping them off, I hurried back home and muttered to myself, "All right, let's do this." Then I had the movers take away the furniture, household items, and my personal belongings that I had packed up the night before. The destination was my parents' house, where I had already explained my situation.
"Come back home. You can stay as long as you need."
My elderly parents had told me, and I decided to take them up on their offer. After calmly finishing the moving process, I did not go to Mike's funeral venue, but instead returned to my parents' house. At home, my parents had prepared all my favorite foods and were waiting for me. As I was enjoying the meal, my cell phone rang. It was Nancy. I had been ignoring it, but the phone kept ringing every 30 seconds. It was relentless. I sighed and decided to answer the call. "Hello, what is it?" On the other end, Nancy yelled.
Old hack, where the hell are you? The funeral has already started. What are you doing? Get back here now.
Nancy's shrill voice made me grimace. "Can you stop yelling? I don't plan on attending the funeral." Then Nancy screamed through tears.
Pissed off. Where on earth is there a wife who wouldn't attend her husband's funeral? Everything's a mess here. Just do what you need to do.
I replied calmly. "You should be able to manage the funeral by talking to the funeral director. You're 27 now. You should be able to handle it. Good luck." With that, I hung up on Nancy, still screaming. The phone rang loudly again, but I continued to ignore it. I spent some relaxing time at home for the first time in a while. As the time the funeral was probably ending approached, I took a shower, dried my hair, and saw over 200 missed calls on my cell phone. Most were from Nancy, but the latest missed call was from an unknown number. I decided to call it back.
"Hello, is this Mia?"
It was Mike's brother, Ken, whom I had met a few times before. He was currently the leader of Mike's relatives. "It's been a while, Ken." As I responded, Ken, with a voice mixed with anger and confusion, said,
"Mia, where are you? Why aren't you at Mike's funeral? It was complete chaos here, and frankly, it's indecent."
I sighed and asked, "Is the whole family there?" Ken confirmed, "Yes, but..."
"Nancy checked the house and said all the appliances and your belongings are gone. I don't understand what's happening."
I simply answered, "Yes, I moved out during the funeral." Ken exclaimed, "What?" And I could hear the murmurs of the family in the background.
What are you thinking? How can you not attend your husband's funeral and move out during it? Come back here and explain yourself properly.
Nancy screamed over the phone, but I told Ken, "I've left a tablet at the funeral services reception. I'll make a video call, and we can talk about the reasons." After hanging up the phone, I took out my tablet. I made a video call to the tablet I had left behind at the venue. Immediately, it connected, and I could see Nancy, Sky, Ken, and many other relatives in the background. As soon as they saw my face, Nancy, with tear streaks on her cheeks, yelled at me,
What are you doing? Get over here now. We'll talk after you get here.
I calmly responded, "No, I will not be coming there." Nancy started berating me furiously. The relatives looked at me skeptically. Ken, somewhat perplexed, said,
"That's incredibly unreasonable. You're Mike's wife and Nancy's mother, aren't you? Don't you have any feelings for Mike? You were husband and wife after all."
That's when I decided to tell the truth. Of course, I was shocked when Mike died, and I intended to hold the funeral properly, but that intention disappeared quickly.
"Why?"
Ken asked, bewildered. "Ken, Everyone, please listen to this first. I then took out Mike's cell phone from his belongings and played a voicemail.
Hey Mike, where are you? You're already late. We agreed to have a romantic getaway at a fancy hotel today.
Everyone on the tablet gasped. I continued to play the voicemail.
Why aren't you picking up your phone? Did your wife find out? You told me I love you more than that ugly woman. You liar.
I paused to play back. The relatives in the background were murmuring loudly. As you heard, Mike was on his way to a cheating trip when he had the accident. There were also quite a few couple photos in his phone that I can't show here. I told everyone, still in shock, on the screen. Moreover, Mike hated me. He didn't contribute to the living expenses and only complained when he was home. And to find out he was cheating, it would be absurd to still have feelings for him. Ken muttered, shaken.
Mike did. That is. How could he?
That's awful.
I wouldn't want to attend my husband's funeral either.
A female relative shouted from the background. Then Nancy, in a panic, argued.
Even if Dad was cheating, you should at least attend the funeral. It's your fault for not being attractive enough to keep him.
That's when Sky chimed in.
Old hag, where did you put the TV? I can't play my games.
The relatives looked on, appalled, seemingly unaware of Nancy and Sky's indifference. Ken was holding his head. Yes, even if I had grown tired of Mike's cheating, I might have attended the funeral if I still cared for Nancy and Sky. But you can hear from their words now, can't you? I've been oppressed at home all this time. Nancy gasped. The relatives looked at her and Sky with disdain. That's when I played my edited verbal abuse collection.
Don't wash your stuff with mine. Your germs are going to get on me. Seriously, it's disgusting.
Sky's voice was also on the recording.
Old hag, didn't I tell you not to give me carrots? Are you senile? Go buy me juice. You're useless.
Nancy and Sky's abuses continued to play. The relatives' expressions turned grimmer.
Hey, stop it. Recording us is sneaky.
Nancy yelled, but I continued playing without expression. Sky looked bewildered, not fully grasping the situation. As you can see, it may have been unreasonable for me not to attend the funeral, and I apologize if I caused any inconvenience. But as you heard, this is how Nancy has been treating me. Sky has also been influenced by her and treats me like a slave. I paused for a moment and then stated, I have no more feelings for Mike or for them. That's why I didn't attend the funeral and why I moved out.
You bastard.
Nancy started to yell at me, but Ken quickly interjected.
Mia, I'm sorry for Nancy's behavior. I apologize on behalf of Mike as well. You don't have to come to the funeral. They've done enough to deserve this.
I appreciate your understanding, I responded, and the relatives nodded somberly.
I'll also scold Nancy and Sky on this side. Thank you for enduring and staying as part of their family for so long,
Ken said, bowing to me. I bowed back and then ended the call on the tablet. I slept well that night. I don't know how the funeral ended after that. 2 days later, Ken contacted me again to apologize.
Despite holding the funeral service, It was a mess. Nancy and Sky kept blaming you, and the relatives have completely disowned them now. I hope you stay well and find happiness. Mia.
After ending the call with Ken, I returned to my daily life. However, a week after Mike's funeral, as I was leaving work and stepped outside the building, there were Nancy and Sky. I was furious, and Nancy dragged me to a cafe. "I don't want anything to do with you anymore, but do you need something?" I asked, and Nancy said,
"I don't want to see your face either, but you wouldn't answer your phone, so I had no choice. Tell me where Dad's inheritance is now."
"Inheritance?" I murmured, and Nancy became enraged.
"There has to be Dad's bank account with money in it. I only found $1,000 in cash at home. You must have taken out my dad's money."
I calmly told her that was all there was to Mike's inheritance.
"What?"
Nancy froze, and I explained. He couldn't save any money, and towards the end, I was the one paying the living expenses. Also, it seems he was quite generous to his mistress. Nancy's face grew paler by the second.
"What? So you're serious? There's really not even $1,000 left from Dad's inheritance. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live, especially with Sky here?"
I flashed a grin and said, "Just work. Isn't that what everyone else does?" Nancy fell silent for a moment, but then burst out.
"That's right. What about the insurance money? You work at an insurance company, and Dad must have had life insurance, right? When do we get that money?"
After sipping my coffee, I told her. He always found signing up for insurance too troublesome and did nothing about it. The only policy was one I took out on him.
"How much will that be?"
Nancy yelled, so I replied, "Well, at least $500,000 will be coming." Nancy's face lit up, but I immediately added, "Well, since I'm both the policy holder and the beneficiary, it really doesn't concern you." Stunned, Nancy blurted out,
"What? Are you saying we don't get a penny?"
"Yes, that's right." As I spoke, Nancy shouted,
"Then you need to continue taking care of us. You're my mother and Sky's grandmother, right?"
I calmly stated, "I've already filed to end our family ties. You and I are now strangers. I never legally adopted you, nor do I have any obligation to support you." Nancy persisted.
"Don't you care about Sky at all? If I'm struggling, Sky will too."
Sky was playing a game next to us during this conversation. Seeing that, I sighed. "So you should work to prevent struggling. That's what a mother does, right?" I did. When Nancy turned pale and was at a loss for words, I asked, "By the way, have you spent any of Mike's savings?" She answered,
"Of course, I needed it for living expenses."
I chuckled. "Too bad for you. Mike had debts, about $60,000, I think. Since you've touched the inheritance, you've inherited the debt too. I, on the other hand, have renounced my inheritance." Seeing the color drain from Nancy's face, I showed her the collection emails on his phone. As Nancy trembled, I continued, "Oh right, about the house. Since I've been paying the mortgage, and it's in my name, I've decided to sell it. You need to move out soon, okay?" Then Nancy screamed,
Are you taking the house from us?
Yes, I am. I looked at her seriously. As Nancy's face rapidly changed colors, she suddenly bowed deeply across the table.
Mia, I apologize for everything up to now. I'm sorry for what Dad did too. So please come back home. Otherwise, we're doomed.
As I remained silent, Nancy pleaded with tears.
Please, Mom, don't abandon us.
I smiled at them one last time and said, I will never forget how terribly you've treated me. Now you two should enjoy your lives together. And with a final act of kindness, I paid for our drinks at the cafe and left. Afterward, Nancy desperately searched for any other assets Mike might have left, but of course, there were none. Nancy ended up bearing Mike's debts, and she and Sky went around to relatives begging, please lend us money, let us stay with you. However, having seen their true colors at Mike's funeral, the relatives refused, saying, we want nothing to do with you. Without anyone's help, they were left with nothing but debts. I issued an eviction order to them without mercy. Of course, Nancy resisted, but I conveyed through my lawyer. If you refuse to leave, are you prepared to cover the costs of a lawsuit? Thus, Nancy and Sky reluctantly left the house. Eventually, they moved into an almost dilapidated apartment. Unable to survive on Mike's inheritance alone, Nancy had to start working. However, due to her personality, she quickly caused trouble at work and seemed to have quit. Now, Nancy is reportedly working multiple part-time jobs day and night. As for Sky, the change in environment made him even more rebellious, hurling insults at Nancy, who had always been close to him, and sometimes even becoming violent. Currently, he calls her an old hag, which she has to accept as a result of her own actions. I hope Nancy will face the hardships of life in society from now on. And I hope she can raise Sky a bit better, although it might be too late. For my part, the sale of the house and Mike's life insurance payout have considerably boosted my finances. I identified Mike's affair partner and claimed compensation. The affair partner managed to come up with the money by selling the luxury items Mike had given her. I've moved out of my parents' home and am now living alone in an apartment close to my office. Work has been going smoothly, perhaps because I'm free from stress, and I've decided to accept a promotion I had previously turned down due to my busy personal life. Soon, I plan to reward myself with a long-desired trip abroad. I've had enough of marriage and have decided to dedicate myself to my career and take care of my elderly parents. Going forward, I want to live positively, unbound by anything, and take good care of myself.